Hi folks, and today I thought I'd talk a little bit about heart rate training. I was talking with a couple of folks about that this week. I thought, I've never done a video on that. So heart rate training. So first of all, realize that heart rate is a lagging indicator, meaning that there's nothing wrong with heart rate training. I'm not talking out of it, but realizing that heart rate's not real time, so to speak. It lags. I'll get into that. And also to be effective, you need to either know your max heart rate or have the correct zone set up. So if you don't have those things, heart rate training won't be very effective. So what I mean, lagging indicator, if you're on a steady run, you're just running steadily for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 45 minutes, it's not a hilly rolling course or very minor, then heart rate is pretty good. It's going to take the first mile or two to kind of get into it, but then heart rate's going to be a pretty good indication of the effort. However, if you're doing intervals, let's say you're on the track or even just outside doing 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off or something like that, then heart rate isn't going to be very effective for that because it's not going to catch up quickly enough. So typically if you're doing, say, the 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off, you're probably doing that around your 5K pace. I can tell you that I'm not even at the end of that am I going to hit my 5K pace for a heart rate. It's just too quick for that to happen. Heart rate lags a little bit, so it's not as effective with intervals. Or if you have a very rolling course, if the course is very hilly, heart rate lags a little bit too much. Now, when all is said and done, you can look back on that average, but if you're trying to maintain, let's say, 130 to 140, that's really challenging to do on a hilly course because it takes a while to catch up going up, it takes a while to catch up going down. So let's talk about that, the max heart rate or zones, and how do you get those. So first of all, for max heart rate, there's a lot of formulas out there, and in my experience, those formulas are not right for very many people. So first of all, you should know that your max heart rate is largely genetic, and it has nothing to do with your fitness. It's genetic. It does change with age. The older you get it, it tends to drop off a little bit, but it's not a measure of your fitness. A really common formula, and I will tell you this is the worst formula, but I'm using it because it's the easiest, is 220 minus your age is your max heart rate. That attributes to the fact that as you get older, your heart rate's going to drop a little bit. Well, if you take my age as I'm recording this, which is 61, that means 220 minus 61, my max heart rate is 159. A typical training zone for easy running is going to be about 60 to 80%, meaning that my heart rate target zone in that 60 to 80% is going to be 95 to 127. But here's a little bit of a problem with that. My max heart rate is actually closer to 180. So it's not 95 on the low end, it's 108, and it's not 127, it's 144. So that formula would be very off for me, and in my experience, it's off for most people. There are better formulas out there, but I've yet to find one that is really right. So the best thing to do is you can get yourself tested. There's places where they hop you up on a treadmill and they put masks on your face and heart rate monitors, and they can figure out either what your zones are or your max heart rate or both. You just need to know either your max or your zones. You don't have to have both, but it's kind of nice to know both. There are self-tests you can do. If you just go on YouTube and look for testing for max heart rate, you'll find all kinds of examples. A common one is you do a real good warm-up, and then you do a few charges up a hill, and then you do a final one. You look and see how high can you get your heart rate. And your max is going to be a little bit higher than that because chances are you're not going to be able to run to get to the max, but you can get pretty close. By the same token, you can use some race results to figure out what your max heart rate is. I said mine was about 180. I haven't been tested for a while. Last time I was tested, I was 194, and that was probably 10 years ago, maybe not quite 10 years ago, I was tested at 194. Well, I'm older now. It drops over time. Now, that 180-ish I'm getting to by looking at race results, particularly 5Ks, effort at the very end, and kind of guesstimating, well, where do I think my max heart rate is today? But you can get tested, do a self-test race results, but you really need to know either your max heart rate to set the zones or to get a treadmill test to get your zones to make heart rate training effective. So here's some positives on heart rate training. It's very objective. So effort is pretty good, but effort is subjective. Pace is pretty good, but there's things that can affect pace. But heart rate is objective. It's going to be what it's going to be. Conditions. It automatically kind of accounts for conditions. So if you're on a rolling course over the course, no pun intended, of your workout, it's going to factor in your efforts up and down the hills, even though it's a little bit lagging on that. If it's a hot and humid day, that's going to get factored in. If there's wind in your face, that's going to get factored in. Just remember, for conditions, it's a lagging indicator. So if it's a really hot, humid day, you're going to have to go easier at the beginning, even though your heart rate looks okay, because your heart hasn't figured out yet that this is terrible conditions to be running in. And it does let for fitness changes take into account. So if you become more fit, you're going to have to run faster to stay in that heart rate zone. Conversely, if you're not as fit, you're going to have to run slower to be in the zone. So it's objective. It does a good job going differently with conditions, and it helps with your fitness changes. Some reasons why not to use it. As I said, it's a lagging indicator. Unless you're doing those really steady runs in good conditions, it's hard to use heart rate to keep up. There are things, and I just noticed I misspelled caffeine, there are things that affect your heart rate like caffeine, and there's some other things that really aren't a factor in what's going on with training in your heart rate. So it's not always giving you the best picture. And then finally, how do you race? At the end of the race, the prize isn't for the person who ran the best heart rate. The prize is for the person who ran the fastest pace or ran the most minutes. So that's one reason that I don't personally use a heart rate monitor for training, although I used a heart rate monitor and have for 20 years, is because that's not how I'm going to perform in a race. So anyway, there's a little bit about heart rate training. Any questions, just comment below.